Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Hospitality TV. I am your host, Raphael Peterson. If this is your first time tuning into the episode, thank you so much for joining. This is a show that was created from the hospitality industry for the hospitality industry. The goal here is to interview some amazing people that have real life insights and lessons. Hopefully, we can learn from some of the things that they've done so that we can be better. By default, those around us can be better, and we can all be better at what we do and achieve our goals. The one thing I'd like to ask is if you think that this show provides you any value whatsoever, please share the show. The more we share it, the more it gets in front of people, the more chance it has to help more people. We are on podcasts on Apple and Spotify and Google. We're on YouTube at Hospitality TV RAF, and then we're on Instagram at Hospitality TV. That's where I share most of the shorter clips. Those are very shareable, easy to share on that. So please hop on, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. So on to today's show. How are you, sir?
Good. Thank you for having me. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for having a platform for people to come on and kind of talk about the ins and outs of the hospitality industry. A platform for German wine a little bit today, which is also very cool.
So in-house, we have Mr. Zack Musick. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly? I meant to ask you.
Yeah, Musick.
What an epic last name.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate you.
Current Director of Education for the German Wine Collection. Former industry head as all of us, a former sommelier and wine director as well. So we're going to get into some questions. What do you got going on over there?
Oh, so we are opening up as we're getting through the beginning. I couldn't wait.
I'm gonna clear my palate.
Yeah, there you go. So this is from. I figured since we're doing this in the morning, let's bring some bubbles. So this is German Sekt from Sekthaus Romland. This is coming out of Rheinhessen from Florsheim, Dalsheim. The Romland family is really responsible for kind of the rebirth of German Sekt. You know, the Germans drink a lot of bubbles, more sparkling wine than any other country. And so it would only make sense for them to be producing high quality bubbles in the country. And for a long time, there weren't those leaders like Volker Romland going out and really kind of setting new standards. And that's really what they've done since 1990. And so we are drinking the Mary Louisa. It is named after his eldest daughter. It is all organic, biodynamic, hand harvested on like chalky limestone soil. So there's a lot of similarities between specifically Romland being a sekt house, almost even like a champagne house, and the typical champagne houses. Where they sit in Florsheim, Dalsheim, it actually sits right along the same latitude as Reims.
Can I pour some for you?
Yeah, please. Thank you. This is going to be 79% Pinot Noir, 21% Pinot Meunier. So using those classic champagne varieties as well.
It's got a little color to it too.
Yeah, they are doing 4 years on the lees with this. They always put I love being in the industry. There's something really beautiful about like putting the disgorgement date on the back of the bottle. So whenever someone asks like, oh, how long on the lees? Like you can get it down to the month almost.
Yep.
And so that's always, I think this is 44 months.
44 months on lees.
44 months on lees.
Nice, dude. We've never gotten into wine right away on the show. So cheers,
cool.
man. This is a great way to start.
Cheers, brother.
This is awesome. You can definitely smell that lees character just on the nose. You said sekt house. Sorry, you said a lot there. So I'm trying to digest. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Sekt house, does that mean a dry wine producing house?
So sekt is the term for German sparkling wine. Right? And it actually came about, I want to say like 1825 was almost like the day that it came about. And it was really named, the only reason it was created was it was actually a poor translation. These German translators were translating an old Shakespearean play, and the line was like, "Give me a cup of sack," which was in reference to sherry. And then when they translated it, it came out as sekt. And this was like the sekt factories had just opened up, and he was given in this play, he was given some bubbles. Gotcha. And so that's really, it just kind of morphed into sekt being what that is. And before there were ever like sekt houses, there were these big sekt factories. George Christian Kessler was one of the first sect factory owners, and he was actually a partner in Veuve Clicquot, which is always really amazing. And that's what it shows kind of the contribution that German sparkling wine houses had to champagne. Even Joseph Krug started Krug Champagne. Before that, he was a butcher in Mainz. But you have Bollinger, Mumm, like these were all Germans that moved to Champagne and started these champagne houses. So there has always been this connection between Germany and Champagne. I don't want to say that's why they drink all the bubbles. It probably has something to do with it. I mean, but who doesn't like bubbles?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. No, that's so interesting. There's so much history that's related between them, right?
Yeah.
All right, so there's a lot of things I want to cover with you today. Thanks for the bubbles. That's absolutely delicious.
Dude,
that's a great way to start the day.
I haven't had this in a while.
Yeah,
I'm very happy with this. Yeah.
That's really nice.
Super
That's
dry
really
too.
nice. I mean, I think that
So this is 5 grams of dosage too.
Okay.
Which is like
it's just a touch to round it out, right? It's not like bone dry Blanc de Blanc that's sharp and citrusy, and green apple and tart. This is a little bit richer, rounder, more weight to it. It has its brioche toasty notes. You can get that leesy note from it.
Yeah, and
That's
that kind
great.
of like that ripeness is there, but it's not like pushing 7, 8. I mean, so many champagne houses even are like pushing up to like middle of what brut is, and it's like I prefer my bubbles in that extra brut category.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest thing that people get wrong about German wines today?
Oh, I mean, I think easy. It's sweet Riesling. I think everybody automatically assumes. I mean, they're almost synonymous with each other in America, and that's really that's not the way it is in Germany. I mean, I think people assume you go to Germany and it's like, oh, well, if you're drinking wine, it's sweet Riesling, and that's just it's not what you're having,
right?
You know, and we have, you know, when Jenna Fields started the German wine collection 4 years ago, we went to all of our wineries, all of our producers, and asked them, you know, what is really important to you? And more than one asked if they could never make sweet wine again. And we said yes. Like, yeah, is that what you? I mean, does that kind of fit your whole philosophy? And they're like, no, we want to focus on dry wine. We want to be more terroir driven. Which, as you know, I mean, the sweeter, riper styles, you start losing that terroir after a while. You know, the overall aromas that come forth are more fruity rather than mineral driven. And they wanted, you know, they have these beautiful sites, and they wanted the sites to show. And this is it's much easier to do with the drier style. So we have a lot of producers harvesting their fruit at Spätlese level and then fermenting it completely trocken to have this wine that has, you know, a beautiful balance, but also has that versatility, so you can have it with more food. And
why were German wines made sweet? Why, you know, I think they put it on the map and they became famous for that, right? Versus like other regions didn't necessarily do that. Where did that come from? I
mean, a long time ago, it was very much in fashion. You didn't really have sweet wines. I mean, it was you could have like Sauternes, and even Sauternes, you know, it was shown as being this wine that only the extreme wealthy could have. And even, you know, 19th century, the German Rieslings that were sweet were considered some of the most expensive wines in the world. You know, Mosel Rieslings, Rheingau Rieslings, I mean, they were all wildly sweet. And these vineyard sites were sought after. They're more expensive than the first growths. They're more expensive than, like, you know, there was like giving Romana Conti a run for its money. And just as time progressed, obviously there were some wars that happened, and the sweet wines are still being produced, but a lot of the wines that were being imported into America were bulk co-op wines. Blue Nun, exactly. You know,
Thanks a lot.
These wines that really just misrepresented what German wine culture was and what was being produced in the country. And that's really when, you know, Thierry Thies came along, Rudi Wiest. Both of these guys were like, hey, let's show like the quality of this category. And they kept on bringing in, we're focusing on the Pradicat wines, the Cabinets, the Spätlese, the Auslese, but they were very much trying to show the top quality producers. Right. You know, like Thierry Thies was found Donhoff and was like, bring this in. And Rudy found JJ Prume, and they were like, wow, these wines they're incredible. And they are. I mean, they're still incredible today. You know, I'm not drinking Spätlese Riesling every day, but when you have them, you're like, wow, they're wildly well balanced.
Right.
I mean, and they are focusing on these beautiful sought after sites that are almost picturesque, with these kind of like romantic rolling hills next to
Right.
them.
Oh my God. Yeah. You always see those. Like that's like one of the most picturesque vineyards in the world when you look at like the wine Bible and all these things that have these amazing pictures and the steepest vineyards in the world right amongst these riverbanks. You're like, I'm going to Austria. I know it's not Germany. I'm going to Austria this year. It's like kind of like similar, similar. I don't want to offend anybody, but a lot of similarities, right?
Offense,
like I'm so pumped to go there and just see this culture. I was going to say is about the sweetness thing again, like in the winemaker's defense, I feel like the German wine law system was set up to reward the amount of ripeness you could get in the grapes, right? And that's, so obviously they're kind of setting it up, and then maybe that kind of caused for people to, that was the creation of the VDP, right? To kind of branch away from that and start doing their own thing and more of a focus towards drier wines.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, only since, 2002, that's when we started the whole grosses Gewächs category.
Gotcha.
And you started being like, okay, well,
what is the grosses Gewächs category for those who might not know?
So the grosses Gewächs,
because we're getting nerdy. This is a German podcast today on German wine law and German wines. We're gonna get nerdy. If you're, it's just gonna be like this the whole episode. So if this is not for you, sorry, no offense, but this is how it's gonna be the whole episode.
Yeah. And it is cool because there is this. Like you were saying before, so many people are just unaware of what they should be drinking in German wine. And so I think the grosses Gewächs category represents it's the Grand Cru, it's the best. It has to not only come from Grand Cru vineyard sites, but it has to be hand harvested. It has to be harvested under 50 hectoliters per hectare. So super low yields. You have to harvest it at Spätlese level and then ferment it trocken or dry, which is less than 9 grams per liter of residual sugar. So there's all these things that you have to do. And then even after you do all of those things, you have to submit it to a tasting panel. And that's like one of the only categories that's really like that, other than maybe Special Club Champagne, where it doesn't even, you can do all the stuff and then submit it. And, the tasting panel it's the people who run the VDP.
Right. And so a couple of things you said there that were important. The GG category has to be dry.
Has to be dry.
And dry, also known as trocken.
Yep. This
is interesting, is up to 9 grams of residual sugar per liter.
Yeah.
Which can be a lot. You can start sensing some sweetness. It's, 5, 6, 7 for sure, right?
Depending. Yeah. And I think that's all in relation. If your acidity is ripping and it's really high.
Yeah.
You can go up to 9 and not really notice it, and that's something that's really nice about German Riesling is it does have that ripping acidity.
Totally.
But if you were to have something a little bit lower and say lower alcohol, right? Those two things, it's all a big balance game. Then it will be perceived as this kind of sweeter kind. And we rarely see anybody get over like 6 or 7 for GGs.
Okay, gotcha.
Only in really ripe years, right?
Right.
It's like 13. You might have seen a little bit more of that because it was a little bit of a warmer year. And really the cooler years are the ones that, especially with global warming, the ones that they're like, hey, this is great. This is going to be a great year. They can get a little bit longer hang time on the fruit. So you get this complexity and depth. And then you're able to have that dry style too.
Yeah.
So it's a tough thing to do because you can always ferment it all out, but it's about creating that balance. And that's why so many of these top winemakers are rewarded, because it's not about just what they're doing in the vineyard site, even though they will say that they make the wine in the vineyards, as the best winemakers say. But the blending afterwards is really what, determines a lot of the quality.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're not allowed to, they can't add any sugar to the must or anything like that, right? Was there a time where they could? I can't remember that. Or
there were ways kind of around it, but the VDP, the Germans being very German, they're like, no. No
Well, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So the whole quality level is based on that.
Yeah. And so, you can get in a lot of trouble for doing anything like that.
Yeah,
for sure.
I want to jump to we're talking about while we're getting deep into the German wines. So I definitely want to talk about kind of the sales side of your company that you're at right now, and a little bit about your background in hospitality also. But while we're here, being the director of education, if you wanted to give a brief introductory to the wines of Germany, ideally in a couple minutes or less.
Good. Yes.
If you were able to do that. I know it's a very complicated area.
Yeah.
But, somebody asks you to just a kind of a cheat code, I would say maybe for your, not the consumer level, a little bit above the consumer level.
Yeah.
And maybe not at the sommelier level who's already studying, but maybe like for your server who works at a restaurant, who knows a little bit about wine. They've heard a lot of these these terms. They know about, German wines being maybe sweet or dry. They have a little bit of a background, but still they don't know the differences between Mosel or Pfalz or Rheinhessen.
Yeah.
If you could do a brief introduction into German wines, what would it be like?
Ooh, I mean, yeah, this is the thing, where it's like, hey, you have 2 hours. And I'm like, I don't know if it's enough time.
Exactly.
But I mean, yeah, just to kind of break it down, I think especially, let's say it's someone who, it's the server that is now in charge of the wine list, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, okay, I want to make sure I have a well-rounded list. And when that comes to German wine, I think a lot of people naturally kind of navigate to being like, okay, I'm going to have like all of these Rieslings. And I think where that is important, I think everyone should have a dry and a sweet Riesling. Not even sweet, something that is cabinet level, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit almost off dry, and then something that is dry. And I think both of those work really well. You are satisfying certain palates. You will have someone that comes in that is asking for an off dry wine.
Right.
And to be honest, there isn't anything that compares to like cabinet Riesling
right.
for that category.
So much better than Moscato, for example.
Exactly.
In my opinion.
Which is something that a lot of people tend to, we have half bottles of Moscato.
Easy
and you're
go-to.
like,
Yep.
so you just have a little bit more versatility with something that at the cabinet level,
Right.
especially depending on what cuisine you have at the restaurant.
Right.
And then something dry. And the reason you always want to have a dry Riesling on your menu is because of that versatility. We just had the Riesling birthday recently, International Riesling Day. And one of the funny memes that I saw was it was a picture of like every type of food like crammed into one little
I saw
square.
that one. Yeah.
And then it's like
what it pairs with.
What it pairs with, and it's like, and it's true, and I think going further, you don't have to have a dry Riesling from every region. Mm-hmm. It's like find one, and it can be from Pfalz. Pfalz tends to have a lot of different soil types. It tends to have a lot of limestone, which is always cool, right? Mm-hmm. It bumps up your acid a little bit more. Mosel tends to be better for a lot of the Prädikat wines. It's, in my opinion, they produce the best Prädikat wines. If you're looking for Spätlese or Auslese, I tend to focus that way.
And when you're saying Prädikat, is that fair to assume kind of like you're saying off-dry wines?
Off-dry wines
within that quality level?
To even like something that is considered sweet.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
Something like dessert wines.
Yep.
They've been doing it forever.
For sure.
They are the best at it.
For sure.
But really just finding, like, talk to your rep, reach out to me and taste through some things. And I think so many buyers even get so caught up in the fact that they need to have the one that people are going to buy the most of, when it's in reality, like if you're a server, you're a wine director, you are designing your wine program, get the one that you can get behind, that you really like,
right?
Something that, it works with your food, but have something like, if you don't like it, and even though it's sold, like, don't put it on your list. And that, in my opinion, that goes for everything.
Of course.
And so, and that's, which takes me to my next point, which is like, Germany is so much more than Riesling. Germany just overtook France in terms of Pinot Blanc production. Mm-hmm. So they're now producing more Pinot Blanc than any country in the world. Third largest for production of Pinot Noir, and it's outstanding.
Third largest in the world.
Yeah.
Pinot Noir.
Yeah. So in like 85, they were second largest in the world. So and then 86.
What? Really? That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean,
over like United States and France and New Zealand.
France is number one. France will always be number one.
Sure.
Right. And so, right behind France was Germany. And it was you saw more Pinot Noir than you did any other red varietal. I mean, twice as much. I mean, a lot of the other grapes, I mean, almost all of our producers, whether or not we import their Pinot Noir, they are producing Pinot Noir. I mean,
right.
And so many of the regions, I mean, you go there and, everywhere you go, they're like, oh, do you want to try the Pinot Noir? And a lot of the time it's cool because, I mean, Pinot Noir craves that cool climate. I mean, everything points to the fact that like Pinot Noir is very happy growing in Germany, right?
Right.
Especially in Pfalz. They're like, limestone soils, really cool climate.
Sure.
It makes sense. And it's the reason why you have these, these producers that are like.
Do you think that's where the better in air quotes, better Pinot Noirs are coming out of right now?
The Faults?
Yeah.
I think
Or what are your favorites?
I love the Pinot Noir coming out of Faults.
Yeah, okay.
I love what Friedrich Becker's doing. I love what Okademirat Rebholz, the Rebholz twins, worked under Armand Rousseau. They worked under Jean-Marc Rouleau, both in Burgundy, and then went with him to Patagonia to do the Bodega Chakra projects.
Cool.
Which is another a new area, but it makes sense. Like cool climate, like Pinot Noir makes sense for Patagonia.
Yep.
And so the twins have worked under a lot of big names in Burgundy, making very, very expensive Pinot Noir, and then they come back and it shows. It shows in their production. And then on the other side, as far north as Meyer-Nakel coming out of the R. Mm-hmm. That's as far north as you can possibly grow Pinot Noir, and the quality is amazing. And they've had Pinot Noir planted in these vineyard sites since like second century. Wow. I mean, like forever. Yeah. And they're like steep slate soils. They get amazing ripeness. They're like 60% grade, and so they're able to attain this amazing ripeness in an area where you wouldn't think really any grapes would grow, and they're able to grow these like old German varieties of Pinot Noir.
Right.
So it is really cool to see that. And then Pinot Gris. I think Grauburgunder, Germany produces more Pinot Gris or Pinot Grigio than any other country other than Italy, obviously.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yeah, can't compete there.
No, there's no, we will never surpass. But the quality is also great, and it is its own style. It's not as delicate as Pinot Grigio. It definitely is much more similar to the Pinot Gris that we're seeing coming out of Alsace.
Right.
Or even like Slovenia, like there's a touch of skin contact.
Right.
You see a little bit of that kind of copper ramato kind of color to it. And that's, in my opinion, the truest form of Pinot Gris. And it's like we're seeing it coming out of like Baden and Pfalz. And this year, I think Wine Enthusiast number 52 was a GG, a Grosses Gewächs Pinot Gris.
Nice.
And it's like, cool. Like we are moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
But it's also up to those buyers and those consumers. Going back to I'm way over 2 minutes, by the way, on this explanation.
I forgot the original question. I'm just back into a conversation.
But yeah, I think it's, I think those are the things to focus on. I recently had somebody, I'm not calling out any account, but somebody that tasted through, wanted to put some Pinot Blanc on the list and tasted through a few Pinot Blancs. And we had Pinot Blanc from Wagner Stempel out of Rheinhessen, and it is out of this world. It's amazing. And he went with something from Alsace because it's more classic. And, like we were like, well, it's very, this is like the top, they're the top producers of Pinot Blanc in the world right now.
Right.
And I was like, do you like it more? And he's like, no, I like the German one more. But he didn't think that he could have on 2 German wines by the glass.
Yeah.
And that's something where it's like, and I'm not saying that like everyone should have 2 German wines on by the glass, but if you have a wine that speaks to you, no matter where it's from, if you've got some Chardonnay, Viognier blend from Lebanon and you dig it, like put it on by the glass and get behind it and show people.
To this person's defense, there's extra work involved in that, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think from a consumer standpoint, like they might see this wine, they're like, I have no idea what that is. So now the only way that's going to move is that they've done the work to fully transmit the passion and the enjoyment that they had behind that wine when they tasted it to basically everybody on their staff who's going to come in contact with a consumer or a customer or a guest, sorry. Because if not, it might just sit there and then now it's becoming more of an ego thing versus a proper business decision, which in some cases I feel like a lot of somms do, I'm not trying to call people out, but it's been my experience too. Like I think a lot of people, I've been guilty of it. We get something that we really like, and then maybe not everybody understands. Yeah. And everybody in your staff understands why they should be drinking it or why their guests should be drinking it. And then maybe it just gets lost a little bit, right? So then the reality behind that choice is that that's not a really good business decision. And you're not making a good decision as a sommelier for your wine program, because at the end of the day, if you fill in and again, I'm not saying that this is what's happening, but if you're not careful with, with putting things on your menu that are ultimately going to sell, then that's just basically your ego putting things on the menu. And I see that a lot, right? Yeah. So So into that person's defense, that they might have also just been like, do I want to go through the work of having to explain to my entire staff who's going to be in contact with the list of why people should drink this wine? They might just feel like, dude, I'm understaffed. I had so-and-so quit last week. I'm also acting general manager right now.
Totally.
I just got to make this easy for me, right? So I think that happens a lot too. And it's finding that balance of, I've been thinking about this, man. Thank you. I've been thinking about this too, because I think it's our job, because I work for an importer now as well. So we're doing similar jobs. Like, how do you make that as easy for the buyer as possible? So if you see a hesitation, how could it be like, maybe on our end, there's like, and listen, it's not just, it depends on how good your tech sheets are. I don't know what your tech sheets look like, but
yeah, they're German, so they're in depth. Yeah.
It's been my experience that like most tech sheets for any distributor, I don't care who it is, like they're not telling me exactly what the server needs to know to recommend that wine,
or it's
right?
too much. Like ours,
or it's too much. Like and again, sorry, I'm not trying to get too off track here, but like in my last years when I was a wine director, I mean, my education shifted completely to like, how do you sell this wine in 5 seconds?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, that's all you're going to need to know when you're on the floor. So I've been thinking more about this. I'm like, man, I'm trying to like revisit the things that I'll give people. It's like when you're in that, going back to the scenario we're talking about, where you might see the look in this person's face of like, dude, I don't even want to go through the work of having to put this wine on the list and everything that means. We might be able to give them something that's like, no. And here is the concise information that you need to successfully sell this, and just need to hand this off to your staff. And maybe, you know what, I'll come in in the evening and hang out at the bar, and your service I can talk to them. Yep. Like, I think it maybe requires a little bit more of a gentle push in that direction. A little bit of hand holding. For sure.
And I agree. And I think for certain places, it's also up to us to do what's right for the restaurant, and it's like, I'm not going to certain places and being like, like, hey, you should carry this muscateller, or like, at like the dive bar downtown, and be like, it's $20 a glass. You can sell it,
It's on sale.
Yeah. And so it's, we have a little bit of that responsibility. And I think behind it, it's like, these are the reasons why. And I tend to relate it to a chef putting something on the menu. And, a lot of chefs can keep their menu real easy and simple and be like, we have like this cheeseburger, and it's like lettuce, tomato, pickles, and ketchup. And you're like, okay, well, that's great. And people will come in, they'll be like, yeah, that's fine, and, or you can do something else and make it like a little bit more difficult, but more true to them, and create more of an experience. Like maybe do a lamb burger with like roasted red bell peppers and goat cheese and arugula. And people are like, oh, wow, that's different. But, those are the experiences that the guests remember when they leave. Like nobody remembers like the time they went out and had a glass of Camus and they had like a mediocre steak. They're like, they got home and they like immediately forgot that. Or they went to the sushi restaurant and they had a California roll and some like hot sake. Right. Like you're forgetting that. But the time when you go and you like have some nigiri from the sushi chef, like she does a whole omakase, and you have some like older Spätlese or some like cool Chevion or something that you're like, wow, I never would have thought that this makes sense with this. Like you remember those things. Like a year later, you're like telling people like, oh, it was so cool at this restaurant. They had this lamb burger and we had it with this Northern Rhone Syrah. It was Cornas and it was, it was amazing. And it's like,
sounds amazing.
Yeah. And but those are the little things. And it doesn't need to be something as like Cornas and lamb burger. It can be like a pizza and German Pinot Blanc. And they're like, wow, like this is what you have to do. Like get the pizza. It's $12. Get the glass of Pinot Blanc. It's $11. And then it creates this experience around that restaurant.
No, dude, I love it that you took it there. This is that. And like, I really mean this when I say like, this is a tool to enhance your guest experience in a different way. Maybe something that they haven't had, something they haven't tried before, and they're going to pair it with some food that's going to absolutely blow your mind. I love that you took it there, because that's really what these wines are. And I'm not just saying that. I'm familiar with the portfolio. Yeah. Like I met Jenna before. I've tasted. Yeah. We used to have some of the wines. Like, we're not just bringing in random portfolios here on the podcast. Yeah. All right. Like I'm super excited about this book. I know a lot of the wines, and they're really, really good.
Yeah. I mean, you were at a steakhouse, and like the place that where you wouldn't. And that's a great example. And like a very like a steakhouse that everybody likes going to. And you could have your entire list be focused on like Bordeaux and California wines and Barolo and Rioja. And the fact that you did take a chance in your German Pinot Noir section was...
God, those were so good.
It was deep and it was really cool. And you had them from different areas and regions, and like people would have them and be like, wow, like I had this crazy, weird tableside steak Diane with this like German Pinot Noir from the R, you know?
Yeah, there are some great producers.
I literally did that at the restaurant, and it was amazing. Nice. I'll never forget it. And I'm like, dude, this is such a... Before I worked for these guys too, and it was like really cool then from a somm perspective. Yeah.
That's awesome. What I'm sure you've had a couple of these, so try to dig in the memory bank. You probably don't have to dig too hard. What have been some of your best food and wine pairings with Riesling? Like a couple that have just like scarred you in a good way.
Oh,
there's got to be a couple.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I always think. I mean, there's a few that you're like, yeah, this makes sense. I mean,
like give me one with like a dry German experience and then off dry or sweet, kind of.
Yeah.
Like that sweetness always creates such an opportunity to pair with so many different things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I always go like, I mean, this was at, God, man, like a hole in the wall ramen spot. And I will say I brought a bottle of like Cabernet Riesling. It wasn't, I want to say, I think it was a Von Buhl. It wasn't wildly expensive. I think I bought it for like, $18, and I brought it with some other friends, and we had some tonkatsu ramen, and like I added like a little bit too much chili oil, and I don't handle spice extremely well, and it was like the way that it worked with the Cabernet Riesling. It was like I was with two other people, and we took down this bottle so fast, to the point where it was like you had to go back and forth. It was so enjoyable to go back and forth between the bottle and the ramen that you just couldn't stop. I mean, it was silent. It was silent at this table for like 15 minutes just because we're like just taking down the ramen. And so I think overall the way that a touch of residual sugar and acid works with, the like a little bit of a heavy broth ramen, but also like complements like the nori. It's able to like cut through any like fat. If you have like, pork chashu, it's like it cuts right through that, and it elevates all those things. And then that heat, you lose a little bit of the heat, but get the flavor. And then the heat also takes away the sweetness. So the wine is drier. And so it's this beautiful marriage. And it was definitely one of those things that it was like an aha moment, even after like I had already been like kind of doing the somm thing, but it was something where I was like, I get it. I'm like drinking the Kool-Aid now, and I'm like, yeah, I want to do this forever, gain a ton of weight, but just be this like guy who lives in Japan who drinks Riesling and eats ramen all day.
Oh my God.
And then like for dry, I had some older Schäfer Fröhlich, who's Schäfer Fröhlich it's a producer from the Na region. They sit in the village of Bockenau.
How do you pronounce that in the region? Na. Okay,
so
it's
like,
definitely not Nahe.
Not Nahe. Naha.
I definitely call it that.
The E at the end is always like a
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, Naha.
Okay.
And this producer does a Felsneck bottling, which is always like the 2018 Suckling named it like best white wine in the world. It's not like affordable by any means, but it is very good. And I did it with the steak. I did it with like a nice ribeye. And I would have like not even that long ago, let's say like 9 years into me being a sommelier, I would have told you that pairing that wouldn't make sense. And it 100% changed my mind. It's got the body that it has and the way that it's able to cut through fat. It was like we were having like some A5 Wagyu. This was at Matsu up in Oceanside.
Oh yeah.
And they have this A5 Wagyu, and it was like, you do it with Riesling, and it was like
nice.
I mean, and it's one of those things where I was like, wow, it really does pair with everything. And it's like, I mean, I still will always love like older Bordeaux or some Chateau Moussard and some steak. Like it's amazing. It's great.
For sure.
Like I'm not discrediting that in any way, but it is something to try. Especially like, I mean, I would encourage like every big sushi restaurant that has like A5 Wagyu nigiri, like even if you don't sear it or you barely sear it, It is wild. It is the coolest thing that in my head still to this day, like I know why it should make sense, but a part of me is like, no, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And then you do it and you're like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like structurally, you're like big and fat, lots of acid.
Right.
And it just, it works. And you get so much more, not just out of the wine, but out of the meat too.
Right.
Yeah. And
Right.
that would be my second top. I mean, I have a few, but those are definitely the top two.
Yeah. Sounds amazing. I mean, that's the beauty of it too, just the different sweetness levels. You can pair it with so many different things.
Yeah.
My dream job forever was like, cause I grew up in Peru. I'm half Peruvian. I went to high school down there, from 13 to 20. So I've lived in Peru for 7 years, and the food in Peru is ridiculous. Like the seafood down there is just out of this world.
Yeah.
It's the best in the world.
No.
Like hands down.
Yeah,
Like, there's
yeah,
no like, I mean, I don't know, like maybe Japan, like there's a conversation, but like I don't want to open up that can of worms. I've never been to Japan, so I can't talk.
Yeah.
But as far as like in the Americas, at least,
Yeah.
like some of the best food in the world for sure, best seafood in the world.
Well, they do like the Peruvian ceviche is
It's
like
insane.
nothing
It's
compares.
insane. And their restaurants are like number one on these
Yeah.
lists. I mean, they're crushing it. But there's so much variety, and there's not a big wine culture in Peru. So people are more about beer and they're about cocktails and
Yep.
pisco, but the wine culture isn't isn't like here. There's wines, but the wines that they're getting are, there's a lot of Argentinian wines, there's Chilean wines, there's Spanish wines.
Yeah.
But they're not really getting French wines. They're getting no American wines. Although I saw the freaking Snoop Dogg Martha Stewart collab when I was
Some
there for
91
New
Crimes.
Year.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, there was that wine in the supermarket in Lima. I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Yep.
These freaking guys.
Yeah.
But
Snoop's going down there and he's
oh
like,
my
you guys
God.
should carry my wine.
Unbelievable. But you're not seeing American wines of quality. You're not seeing seeing French wines. You're certainly not seeing German wines. So, but the potential there for the pairings just from with the cuisine. I brought down a couple of white wines with me this past New Year's, and it was unbelievable. We had like a dry Riesling. I had a Grand Cru Pinot Gris from Alsace that we have in the book that we had with some other food that my buddy made. Like, it's unreal.
Yeah. Is that just because they don't have like the import companies set up?
Yeah. I'm sure there's a ton of bureaucracy to get into Peru and do that whole thing down there, which is why people don't do it. But yeah, man, we should do something. Change that.
Next
Oh my
venture,
God.
this is the beginning.
That'd be the dream job, dude. Or here, I need a good, like a fantastic Peruvian chef to come here. Because I mean, no offense to everybody out there, maybe I just haven't tried it yet. I haven't really tried great Peruvian food in San Diego. I know some great restaurants in San Francisco that have some pretty decent wine programs, but just not here. Like I need a great Peruvian chef. I'll come. I'll do the menu for free.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hire me. Let me get in there.
Yeah.
Do the staff training, everything. Bilingual, I got you. Let's make it happen. I'm going to clip that. I need a chef to come here and do that.
I mean, it's crazy to think about that too, because when you think about the restaurants that are making like that top 50 list, and it's like most of those, it's like we have that cuisine in San Diego. Yeah. I mean, you see it like every major city does.
Yeah.
But you're right. There's so many restaurants from Peru and you just don't see a lot of Peruvian restaurants.
Yeah. Hopefully that changes soon. But because I'm going to San Francisco this weekend. Oh my God! This weekend I'm excited to go to a couple of my spots. I'll take my mom out to dinner. It's going to be great.
Are you going anywhere in particular that you're excited about?
So actually, I met the somm a couple weeks ago. I was in Paso Robles Cab Camp. I was shooting up there, and I met the somm at La Mar, which is a restaurant from Gaston Acurio. He's like one of the most famous chefs in Peru. He's like the old kind of school. There's the guys that are getting like Maido just got #1 in Latin America. There's this new wave of chefs, but he's like Gaston Acurio is like the old school guy who put Peru on the map for like Peruvian cuisine. And so his restaurant La Mar is really popular in the Barcadero in San Francisco. So I met that somm, and he said that the sous chef there broke away and created his own restaurant that's blowing up, and it's newer. So I'm like kind of go to go check it out.
Nice.
But apart from that, there's a couple of like Mochica's always my spot in San Francisco. Cool. There's Piqueos is another one that's really, really good. Yeah. If you ever go up there, dude, I'll let me know. Text me. Yeah. I'll give you and bring your own wine.
Yeah, totally.
And you're gonna have the best experience. Yeah. The best time ever.
I mean, that's what's cool about kind of being in this industry and doing that and like going to a place you love and then getting a great experience and like being able to gift a somm with like, hey, like this is some old like
try this with that.
Yeah. This is like, but just take it home. Yeah.
Totally.
And then like we order something off the list. Like you always like
that's a
very
pro move
hospitable,
right there.
But then be like, hey,
And then
thanks for making us a reservation, because it's
absolutely
cool. And I always appreciated that as a som,
Yeah.
And then it's like, you try something with the food and you're like, yeah, this is great.
Yeah. All right. On that note, let's shift to your somm days. I want to talk about that. Where were you a somm?
So I became a sommelier at Montage in Laguna Beach.
Okay.
I was a captain server there for a while. It was one of those restaurants. We had 3 somms. Like on busy Saturday nights, we'd have 3 somms on the floor.
Nice.
And then like every captain server was a somm, and the list. I think we had like 1,400 wines on the list.
Jeez.
It was a Bible. It was the place where it was like, if someone was looking for something, we had a vertical of it, probably. And they're like, oh wow, okay, yeah. And it's like it's
a beautiful property.
Yeah, it's a beautiful
property.
And it was like working. I mean, I owe it a lot to the people that I worked there with. It was like Jesse Rodriguez, who you know very well, was like.
That's right. You guys worked there together.
Yeah. He was always like one of my mentors.
Oh, no way! Wow. Yeah, Jesse's the man.
We
worked together at Addison.
Yep. Yeah. So, he, but being able to like work off of a list like that, I mean, you really had to know your stuff, because people would be like, I'm looking for this. Like, oh, I was thinking about doing like Chateau Palmer. And they're like, excellent. We have 13 vintages. And they're always, what's the best one?
Right.
And it's like, you don't not only have to know what the best vintage is, but also have to know like what's the best vintage for them,
Yep.
And so that, being able to do that, and like, I was able to learn vintages in my top regions very quickly. And then I was offered the beverage director position for the Four Seasons on Lanai. So after Larry Ellison bought the island, he revamped the Four Seasons, and he was opening up the lodge up in the Koele Lodge up in town, and then one on the beach, Maneli Bay. And so
how long were you there for?
I was there for just under like 2 years.
What years were you there?
2004 to 2005.
What?
6.
We were there at the same time.
Really?
I lived in Maui from 2002 to 2006.
No way.
Yeah, that's where I got into restaurants.
Yeah. Wait,
that's so funny.
I'm wrong about that. 2012.
Okay, yeah, different time.
2012 to 2014.
I was there 02 to 06.
No way.
Yep.
Yeah.
I had some friends out there, went out to visit, never left.
That's
canceled my trip back.
Yeah, that's the way it works.
Yeah, I was working in finance in San Francisco at the time. I thought I was on my way to be like a series. I was studying for my Series 7. I wanted to be a broker.
Yeah.
And I completely flipped, stayed on an island, started working in restaurants. That's so funny.
And it's great. I mean, and really, I think like a lot of people, like the food culture out there is really good, and it is getting better, especially with like more farms, more people like wanting to eat local.
Yeah,
that being a trend, not just on the mainland, but like very much a trend in Hawaii, and it's very cool to see that. And I think that is like really pushing these chefs, and you're seeing a lot of these chefs going on like Top Chef and like these different like cooking shows, and which is great, and it's bringing a lot more focus, and it's really raising the bar for all these other restaurants. Like if you're not performing at this level in Hawaii, you're not going to survive.
Right.
And that's also pushing, the wine industry. I mean, for us, and it's people always are surprised to hear this, like Hawaii is, I think are in our top 5 states in the country. And it's like, we are in almost every state. And for Hawaii, which is it's not a big state, for them to be consuming so much wine, like so much of our wine, but like overall, like I sold a lot of wine in Hawaii, and it's really cool to see that. And like, it's because people are like eating really good food, and it's like, it's fresh seafood, and people want, they want zippy whites, and they want something that's like maybe kind of salty, and it's cool. And it really works with a lot of those things, like Spam Musubi and dry Riesling, all about it.
Oh my God. You were selling that? People were pairing that? That's wild.
I was pairing that.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's doing Spam Musubi and dry Riesling, but someone should. It makes sense.
Local Moco and German Pinot Noir.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
Sounds great.
I'm
not kidding.
It would be really good. Yeah. So I did that for a while. It was my first, I was young. I was 24, and I was like running a beverage program. I wasn't, it was.
Oh, you were really young. Wow. So you were a young somm then too at the Montage.
Yep.
Wow, awesome. Okay, so you're 24 as a beverage director on Lanai for a couple of years. Wow.
And it was. It's tough for all the young somms out there. It's tough being a young somm, and you are not taken seriously. It's very much. I mean, you have a lot of guys that didn't really get into wine that'll come in, and, you know, they didn't get into wine until they were maybe like 40 or 50, like once they're successful. And that was always like a tough thing. They'd come in and act like they knew everything. And you'd walk up to the table and they'd be like, you know what? I'm actually okay. I'll just do this. And it's like, it was, you know, it was definitely a blow to the ego a few times. And then I grew out the beard a little bit and like looked older. And then, and you know, it slowly started to change. And once, you know, people realize you really do know like what you're talking about, and you know the list very well, then, you know, you'd be able to like guide people along on a better experience.
Let me ask you this, because I think there's a lot of lessons in like looking back at the past, what you could have done better, maybe what you shouldn't have done. Being such a young aficionado of wine and having that position, and because after that, I know you were a beverage director for another restaurant for several years, also where I'm sure you continue to kind of improve your skills and gain experience. But what's something that you would tell yourself if you would look back on that first job as in a position of buying and as an actual beverage director in Lanai? What advice would you give to yourself to be successful at it, more successful maybe, or what pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah, oh man. I mean, there's always going to be a lot of things, but I mean, I didn't realize kind of the tools that you had to create a really fun program and like some things that you could do. I mean, I'd look at price lists and I'd be like, oh, this is too expensive. I could never pour this by the glass. And I would say that like price lists are very malleable. And that's like something that I would definitely tell my younger self. And I figured it out, I mean, late into the game. And when I would talk to people and I'd be like, oh, I'd love to pour this, but I need it at this price point. And, you know, whoever was running certain, as say we'd have like Lisa Peju would like come to the island and be like, oh no, I can do that. You want to put it like my dad loves the restaurant? Of course. Yeah. We can get it down to that price. And I was like, amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, those things are something that I've learned now doing this, because I do it for people. Yep. And a lot of people just don't know. They
don't ask.
Yeah, they don't ask.
Yeah.
And it's like something really cool. And they're like, oh, we only have so much of this, but we might have more for you if you want to like champion it and pour it by the glass. And it's like we were able to pour, you know, I poured Trefethen at like 5 different properties by the glass. And like one of the properties was going through 10 cases a month of it. And because we were going through so much, we were able to get this like really great price on Trefethen Chardonnay, which is like, you know, it's a very classic Chardonnay. I was very happy with it. But when looking at the price point, I was like, oh, I can't pour that by the glass. And they're like, well, what if we set it up like this?
Right.
And I mean, it allows you to really have a fun, cool by the glass program. But you have to ask. And sometimes I would just do something and not ask. I would just put something on by the glass. Right. And I wouldn't tell my rep, I wouldn't tell the importer. And they'd be pouring like Champollion by the glass. And they're like, you know, there's a $3 like discount on that if you pour it by the glass. And I'm like, oh, I had no idea. And they're like, or like this, like, you know, Hawaii only gets 10 cases, but if we hear you're pouring it by the glass, we'll send a pallet.
Right.
And it was like, I didn't know the inner workings on the back end, where it's like, I just thought I can or I can't. And this is the rule, but it's not. It's everything is like just, you can shift things around a little bit.
I think it also helps to just like be cool with the people that you work with. And maybe every now and then you ask, what are the possibilities of maybe doing this or that? And there's a bigger conversation to be had than you might think.
Yeah.
So,
and I never knew that those were the bigger conversations until my reps, my really good reps were the ones coming to me and saying like, hey, what do you think about this? And I'm like, oh, well, it's too expensive. And they're like, well, we can maybe do this.
Right.
And I never knew there was a maybe.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, there's a maybe involved. Cool.
So I wanted to ask you this question too. And it's a little similar to what you just answered, but maybe you'll give me another answer here too, because I was always curious to know, like, now that you are working in sales and you are working on the import side, is there something that you wish you knew, maybe something different from what you just said, like back when you were a wine director? And if that's too repetitive, I feel like we kind of just answered it too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of, I mean, that same general idea. I mean, I think me going from even like me being at Four Seasons to me going over and working for all the Merriman's restaurants. And I mean, what was so great about that is I was running multiple different programs and I had different demographics because they were on different islands. And that became very fun and cool. And it's like, I would have even, once I figured out kind of how to do that, I would have even gone back to my like Four Seasons self and been like, hey, like I would have been able to make more money for the Four Seasons, you know? And once you really figure that out and how to like target your demographic, and that goes back to us being like, okay, not being, you know, I really liked, you know, there were certain producers, like I really liked, let's say like Maxime Mignon, like right before I left, I discovered Maxime Mignon. I was like, these wines are so cool. But it's like, I'm not putting a bunch of this producer on the list because I know it as a somm. My nerdy somm friends knew who it was. But it's like, it's not going to really like, we're not going to move a lot of it. So like, what are the wines and the places, like where are the holes on my list and like, how do I fill them? And that was something that I wish I had known at a younger age and earlier on in the industry, but being able to fill those holes on a program, and there's holes on like every program. It's just, they're always going to be there, but it's like, all right, within the size of your list, like what are the things that make sense for your restaurant? And learning that over time is always something really cool. And it's something that I felt like I got really good at and I really enjoyed. It was almost like a puzzle. So I started doing it for other restaurants. Like on Maui, I would just do it for, you know, like I would do it for free food, or, you know, I would just set up like a 1099 with them, and I'd get paid and I would do it kind of on the side while I was doing other programs. Or I would just do it like a, you know, family owned spot, and like I liked eating there, but the wine list was less than exciting. And I would be like, hey, like I know all these reps. I know the wines that I would want on your list that'll make you more money. Would you allow me to, you know, and I would work with them. And then every time I'd go in, they'd be like, oh, Zach, we're taking care of dinner tonight.
And it's like, you're helping them out. Totally.
And I was more than okay with that because, you know, I'd get a free dinner and I'd buy a wine that I put on the list that I was really happy with, and I'd have this incredible experience. And I would see more people doing that. And I would see the owners being really happy. And it's like, you know, I think the hospitality industry as a whole is very, you know, it's a big family. Like everybody should at least feel the need to help out these other places. And I think we all have, like, if you see a place that you love, and it's like, doesn't seem like it's doing as well as it should. It's like that's like, hey, like what can I do?
That's so funny.
To make this
those
place
conversations for sure with little people that I run into. You're just like, damn, I want these people to be successful.
But they're like missing
don't
this
even
one
buy my
thing.
wine. Like, I don't care. I just want you. Like, how do I be? How can we make you successful? You know?
Or a restaurant you love to eat at, and you're like, hey, like let me throw some things on. Like, not even my wines. Like, we don't even have to buy. I'll do one of my wines, and then let me just throw on like 10 other things. You know? Or like, I went somewhere recently and everything on the menu, all the entrees are like 20 to 30. All the appetizers are 20 to 30. All the entrees are like 40 to 60. And their by the glass list doesn't go over $10.
Wow.
And, you know, and it's like you come to those places and then you're like, you know, they're like kind of struggling, and everyone there is like, oh yeah, the food's kind of expensive. And it's like, is the food expensive, or is like everything else more affordable? And it's like, it's in a nice space. And it's like, no, you guys just need to like you need to have these wines on, and then you're focusing more on your demographic, the same demographic that you're focusing on with your food. You're now focusing on with your wine list. You know, and it's like the guy that wants to go in and order a $60 ribeye isn't going to want, you know, a $7 glass of Cabernet.
Of course. Right. Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see those things and it's frustrating because you want to maybe give your input, but also you don't want to step on toes. You know, it's
hard. But you want to help out your friends in the industry.
So what took you to where you are now, to the German wine collection? How'd you get in?
So
when did you make the switch?
I was buying a lot of these wines. It wasn't until I was working a lot with Jenna Fields, and she had approached me post-COVID. She had just started the company. Rudy Wiest had retired, and she wanted to kind of continue on and wanted to not lose these growers. Like, obviously these wineries were very important. They're very important to me at the time. I bought up a ton of the wines, and she came out and, you know, we did a tasting, and she informed me that I was one of the biggest buyers in the country for Rudy Wiest. And I didn't know. I was just like the guy that was like, you have 7 cases of Hans Wersching Boxbeutel half bottles. Yeah, I'll take all 7 cases of those. And then she was just like, I would pick up an entire allocation for the state and I would pick up all of it.
Yeah.
And I didn't really think twice about it because I was like, cool, I can kind of distribute it amongst restaurants and I can, I know that I can move it. And because it's delicious and, you know, I'm on the floor a lot and different things like that. And when she had come out in like 2021, 2022, kind of that time, she had told me that, you know, she's like expanding. And I was like, wow, cool. I would love to work for a company like yours. Just kind of in a very, you know, flippant way. You know, we're just having a conversation and
Sure.
And she was like, yeah, let's talk about it. And then it kind of grew from there. And she's like, would you want to move back to California? I'm originally from California. My family lives in Orange County.
Yeah.
And I hated the idea of kind of leaving, Hawaii, leaving Merriman's. I loved working for Peter Merriman. I think the whole restaurant group is great. It was very much focused on local food. And he gave me carte blanche on the list. And we were able to create this amazing beverage program around those ideals. But it was like I had reached my peak.
Yeah.
And it was very much like, okay, I can have a bigger impact on the industry if I move and I do something like this, where I'm not selling to the consumer necessarily, but I'm very much trying to influence the sommeliers. I'm trying to influence some of these big buyers on why this makes sense for their program and why you should have, you know, a $110 Grand Cru Pinot Gris on your list from Germany, you know, and it was something that I could convince a buyer to do, you know, and if like they had the trust in me, but it was getting other, you know, people on board with it. And, you know, I think overall that should snowball.
Yeah. So it seems like you pretty quickly moved into your current role, which is director of education in the company.
Yeah, pretty quickly.
So what is your philosophy? How are you approaching this position that you have now, the director of education?
I mean, the easiest part about having this position is representing a portfolio where I just have to open up wine. I mean, like this. I mean, it's like something that I think most people aren't going out and automatically buying a bottle of German sparkling wine that's say like $80, $90.
Yeah.
But me opening it up for somebody and then being like, oh, like this is amazing. Like I would easily put this up against a lot of like champagne houses, anything coming out of like Italy, any cava.
100%. Yeah, this thing is delicious.
You know, it you can taste the quality. And I think once you're in the industry for a while, you're like, you taste something, you're like, this is quality. This tastes good. And it's like being able to just do that. And like that right from the start.
But I guess I'm asking like, what is your goal with being a director of education? Like, how are you structuring that? What are some of the goals that you want to achieve with that?
I think, I mean, there's definitely a lot of goals. I think every list should have at least 1 or 2 German wines on it. Even the small ones. Yeah. I mean, by the glass, like Germany's producing incredible rosé, incredible sparkling wine. Yep. Obviously top producers of Riesling. I think Riesling should be on every menu. I think it should be, you know, like if you have a Chardonnay, you should have a Riesling, and that should be like the second thing. I mean, there's certain restaurants in town that, Underbelly now has the one white wine and it's Riesling. And that's what I want to drink when I go there.
It's a perfect pairing.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think just like bringing down people's walls in terms of, not being able to put on 2 German wines on by the glass. Yeah. And then also changing the narrative away from the idea that German wine is all sweet Riesling.
Right.
If I can do that, I'm happy.
Yeah.
I know my boss is immediately like, well, you need to sell wine. But if I can just change people's minds away from the idea that it's all sweet Riesling. Yeah. And open up people's eyes into like Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris. You know, even if you're like a place and you're like, yeah, we don't really sell a lot of Riesling. That's okay. Yeah, let's taste through. I did a tasting a while back, didn't bring 1 Riesling. I was 16 wines and there were no Rieslings. Mm-hmm. And I think the buyer was even kind of like taken aback, like what? I was surprised. And I was like, well, I looked at your Riesling list. It seemed rather flush. Yeah. And I think these are the holes on your list. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it resulted in a lot of placements. And I think a lot of people, and that buyer was like, yeah, this is the best interpretation of Pinot Blanc that I've ever had, or this is one of the best Pinot Noirs that I've had for the price point. And, and I think that for us is also, you know, with rising prices in France, we're able to sell wine at more affordable prices.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a
And that's huge.
great market for it, for
Right
sure.
now, especially.
No, it's just always interesting to me to kind of see how people are approaching that, because I think education is such a big thing. I think it can be overdone. It's easy to give people too much.
Yeah.
And especially with a topic where German white wines can be, there's a lot that goes in. There's a lot that you have to understand about them.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm just curious, how you approach that with different people. I think you got to feel it out, right? Certain people, they do want like the full, like intense breakdown of like the every technical aspect about this wine. And other people are just like, they just want the easy cliff notes on how to sell this wine to a guest. And finding that sweet spot in between, right? But
it's really
I think
tough
about that a lot too. Now I'm just like, how do we make this easy? How do we make this easy for people, accessible, approachable, digestible?
Yeah.
And it varies from person to person.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think what the average consumer, let's say, is what the information that they are looking for now is changing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like I'll have somebody that doesn't know a whole lot about wine, and I'll like talk about it. And like, yeah, it comes from Germany. It's like this, and someone will be like, "Oh, is it a natural wine?" And it's like I think that's like one of those like popular words right now.
Yeah.
I had someone recently ask like, "Oh, is this like regenerative farming?" Which I hadn't heard a whole lot of, and I'm starting to hear more. And it's like, yeah, like Romland, like regenerative farming.
Yeah.
Right. They have this like micro ecosystem within their vineyard sites, or like, is it organic?
Yeah.
I had someone ask me like, is this hand hard? And you just don't really know like what is the thing that I'm gonna say.
Yeah. What's your take on that, man? It's hard to cut you off. What's your take on these buzzwords that come up?
I mean,
organic, or I mean, I don't want to call organic a buzzword, but it does mean so many different things to different people in different areas.
It is. It's very much. I mean, I think it's important. I think a lot of like your wines are organic,
sure.
And I think like responsible farming is really important. I think too many people get caught up in like, oh, is this like certified? Is this like Demeter certified biodynamic, or is this producer like? Like it's a self-sustaining vineyard site, and they're like just letting it go.
I want to preface this by saying I need to get more educated about really like the nuances of what all these things mean. But it seems like, I was in France last year with the team, and we went throughout the Rhone and northern and southern Rhone and Bandol and Cassis, and we had a lot of these conversations.
Cassis is ridiculous.
If I ever go missing, that's where I'm at.
Yeah,
I'm going to be in Cassis.
Just like
ocean.
Yeah, just cliffside vineyards overlooking.
It's insane.
Blue.
Insane.
Oh yeah.
But we're asking, we're having all these conversations because, again, of course, for us too, it's such a hot topic. People want to know if these wines are organic. And I was really trying to ask these questions like, are you guys organic? What are you doing? This and that. And everybody seems so not baffled, but they're just like, yes and no, yeah, maybe. But like a lot of them too, I think what they were saying is that we're making that switch to get the certification, but the requirements for organics are actually doing more harm to the soil from some of the ingredients that they have to use in their sprays to meet the qualifications of organics, that a lot of people don't do it for that reason. Yeah. It's like, yes, it's an investment. Sure. They have to spend some money to kind of maybe change some ways on doing things a certain way.
Your yields get wildly affected.
Yeah. But it seemed like also they were just like, we kind of don't want to.
Yeah.
We're doing more regenerative farming already, and because of what they're requiring from us is not really how we would like to farm, and not because it's not the right way. It's more because we think that it's actually doing more harm to the vineyards and the soils. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Biodynamics too was another conversation. I think every winemaker had like a different take on what biodynamics meant to them. Yeah. So I think it's just easy for people to throw all this. Is it biodynamic? Is it organic? I only drink organic wines. I'm like, I only drink natural wines. I'm like, do you even know what you're looking for? No. Or is it just a word that...
I would say the average person doesn't know what natural wines.
Yeah. And listen, again, again, in defense of them and the information that they have in front of them, it's difficult to know. You don't know. Nobody knows what they're actually doing. I mean, you don't have to put on the label.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to put the ingredients on there. And I think the reasons that when we go to like Europe and we talk about like organics and things like that, I mean, I think for them they're like, oh well, we've been doing. Some wineries will be like, we haven't changed anything in like 100 years, and like, this is the way we do it. Maybe it doesn't meet the specific qualifications of organics, but I think. The good thing about it is it's like for the American palate, we are trying to get away from like, you know, there's still like over 70 different things that we can put in a bottle of wine and not disclose on the label in America. And like, that's not the way that it is in the EU.
Yeah.
And so I think for those people that are like, yeah, I drink these wines, like, yeah, it might be like in fashion or like a buzzword, but it's like, it is kind of pushing us in this right direction.
Agreed. Yep.
And then at the very least, I think people have gone overboard with it, where they're like, oh, like how many parts per million of sulfur?
Right.
I had someone, that's like something that I get asked.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, I know the ones that are like less than 50 parts per million but it's like, even the ones that are over, it's like, those are not the things that we should be worried about. Like, someone will say that, and then they're going to drink one of the wines that, you know.
Or talk about what they might be eating during the day.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're like, yeah, this guy's eating like, you know, McDonald's. And then he's asking me like how many parts per million of sulfur I have in the wine. And I'm like, dude, you're eating French, like that French fry you just had has more parts per million of sulfur than this bottle of wine.
Exactly.
So I don't know what to tell you. So it is, I mean, hopefully it helps shift the American wine industry in the right direction.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is frustrating. I talked to a lot of winemakers in the EU, and they're frustrated with, you know, us being like, well, it needs to be like organic, or us even asking like, hey, like, are you doing biodynamic practices? I mean, and it's funny because they're like, do you know what you're producing in America? And we're like, yep.
Yeah, exactly. I know I got to get you out of here. I want to do one last thing if we have time. I'd love to blind taste you on the wine. Are you cool?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let me do it real quick. So, no pressure. You don't need to do like a CMS grid or anything like that. Nobody needs to hear that. Everybody already does that on their own.
Like I'm way more
strong. Yeah, exactly. You don't need to do that. I'm way more interested in just to kind of see what your approach is to breaking down a wine. I think it's helpful for other people. That's one of the things I love the most about tasting groups is that you learn something from everybody, right? Like everybody has a little something to offer. Maybe they have this insight on what helps guide them to a certain wine. So again, no wrong answer, no pressure, dude. I think this is a fun process. Cheers.
Cool. Cheers, brother. Appreciate you. Thank you again for having me on.
Absolutely.
I mean, up front, I mean, it's baked apple, right? I mean, it's got this like, it's got this ripeness to it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like you can tell it's either warm environment or it's, just like harvested a touch later. Mm-hmm. There might even be a little bit of botrytis on there as well. Right, you get a little bit of that ginger, that honeycomb, honeysuckle. Oh, it's nice. I mean, the fruit's there. It definitely finishes dry, which I'm more than happy with.
Yep.
I think there is this kind of impression of sweetness on the nose that you get. And I think there probably still is a touch of botrytis on it, especially looking at the color. But the fact that it is finishing dry is nice and pleasant.
What does it remind you of? Like, or what is it not?
It's not California Chardonnay. You know, I'm not getting a whole lot of oak on it overall. There's this a little kind of baking spice quality. So, you know, there might be like large, you know, 1,200 liter barrels or even 500 neutral barrels used.
Yeah.
But I mean, outside of that, you know, you're not getting any vanilla, no real like coconut.
Yeah. Everything you're saying so far is spot on.
It is delicious.
Yeah, it's tasting really good. I'm stoked on that.
You know, but I'm thinking,
I actually made the mistake last podcast on tasting somebody on something and it was cooked. So I learned my lesson. I tasted this earlier.
Are these like from your cellar?
No, not necessarily.
Oh, okay.
They can be.
Oh, okay.
They might not be.
Yeah. You're like, this is the 19.
As I do more of this, I'm definitely going to mix in some stuff that's not from our book.
Cool.
Because I don't want, you know, people are going to be like, oh, it's one of his wines. But, you know, it might be, it might not be.
The palate definitely, it threw me for a loop. The nose is very much going like Alsace. And I think because of that botrytis, because of those like apple notes, And then I was even thinking almost like maybe like something Loire.
Yeah.
But now I'm thinking more Burgundy.
No, stick with the first two. I'm not going to let you get derailed here. One of the first two.
I know. Always. That's like the blind tasting thing. Always stick with like your first.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
I like talk myself out of shit
100%.
all the time.
Yeah, that's what they say. Stick with your gut. Stick with your first reaction.
Yeah. That tension in the mid palate and the fact that it finishes dry. I'm gonna go all sauce. I think it has this structure. And it's got this like depth. And I think a lot of the vineyard sites in this area, there is a touch because of the continuation of like it's more or less like falsy. I think it has those qualities. I'll have one more splash.
Do it.
Appreciate you.
Get in there.
Dude, it is delicious. God, I really like it. Yeah, something tells me. I mean, it's not Loire enough, so I'm definitely going all sauce.
All right, let me grab the bottle. Great.
I'm gonna say that this is. I'm gonna say this is 2017 Riesling from Alsace.
You were close, sir. You were real close. This is Chenin Blanc. That was your other option from the Loire.
No!
This is not an easy wine, though, because it is a later harvest Chenin Blanc. So these guys do a straight kind of regular harvest time Anjou Blanc, 100% Chenin Blanc. And then they have another bottling, which is what this is, and they date it. So it's Le Vendage de
Tardif.
23rd of September. Yep. And it's not tardif.
Tardif. Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
a couple of weeks after normal harvest time. So you were right in saying that it has a little bit riper. It feels like it has some like notes of later harvest, and then they ferment fully dry.
Okay.
So, dude, definitely not an easy wine. I was thinking, we were talking about, just again in the realm of Riesling, especially when you can go late harvest and you have like these Spätlese and Auslese that are being fermented fully dry now. It's kind of like a similar concept in there, but you were right up there, man.
This is delicious.
It's great, right? Yeah, it's drinking really well right now too. I'm stoked on that.
Yeah.
Take that with you, man.
Is that okay?
100%. Pour the decanter back in there, and we'll do. So, okay, last, we're going to finish up. There's something that I've been trying to do, a tradition. I'd love for you to leave a question on the show for the next guest that comes in. What's something that you would like to ask somebody? There'll probably be somebody in the hospitality industry. They might be a wine person, but at least connected to the industry in one way.
I would say, the question that if they are connected within the wine industry, or even if they aren't, I'm always interested. I think the world of wine is changing at a more rapid rate now than ever. And there's so many things. There's such a wealth of knowledge and information. It's impossible to know everything. I'm always interested in like right now, what are you excited about in the world of wine? Like being a particular like producer, which is ideal. Like, right. Like what producer are you really excited about? Like, what did you come across recently that you were like, this is super cool? And maybe it's not for everybody. Maybe it's not just super delicious, but it's like something for you that you were like, oh, I love this, And maybe it's like, oh, I had this older bottle of like Weinbach Gewürztraminer, which I had lately. And I was like, this is super cool. Nice. But like, what have you tasted recently that like sits in your mind? Like when someone has that question, like, what do you have that bottle?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you right now. What do you have? Do you have something that you're like, ooh, I had this recently and it just was shocking? And like I will say, like I had an old bottle of like 1972 Louis Martini, and it was like so cool. Not delicious.
Yeah.
It wasn't delicious, but it was like something I was like, it makes you think, you know, and it was something that would be like, like anybody in the industry would be like, yeah, try this. How crazy is that?
God. Okay. So I would have, the thing that's coming to mind right now, and it's kind of self-serving because it's one of our wines, but it's, I'm just being honest. I haven't been drinking a lot. So that's like a thing. I'm coming up close to 3 months of not drinking, honestly.
I mean, it doesn't have to be something.
So I've been staying away from putting myself in those environments where I could try some cool stuff for the last 3 months. But right before that, I was tasting 2019 and 2001 Bandol from one of our producers side by side. The 01s were amazing. And just being able, I don't normally have the back vintages with me to go out into the market and show them, but just showing the 19 versus the 01 and seeing that, like, where the wine was, and it was still like such a money place. Like, it's still rich and got a lot of concentration. Like, the primaries and secondaries are like in such great sync, and you're just getting a hint of tertiary, but like it was just shining through. And it was, even like the first time I tried it, I was like, holy crap, this wine is amazing. Like, it's showing so well. So and I think Bandol is like one of my favorite regions if we're talking about like steakhouses and like just big, meaty,
ageability,
earthy, gamey red wines. And ageability, like, is insane.
It's almost unmatched.
Yeah, and some of the wines in the 90s, they start to get a little crazy and like full on tertiary. This 01 was just in such a good spot of like primary and secondary. That's probably the one for me that
not full sweaty saddle, just like a little bit of like horse blanket, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love that. That's cool. See, I like hearing that, because then it's like immediately I'm like
fired up.
I'm gonna try to find some old Bandol, you know, and then drink it and be like, that is. Yeah, I think those are like cool questions.
Brother, as always, I hate to cut this off because I feel like we could talk for another hour. There's like a ton of stuff. Maybe we can do round 2 on one of these. But dude, thank you so much for your time. Yeah, we got to cut it because you got to go. I got to go. I got to get to work. But man, thank you so much for your time. Honestly, I do. I'll end with this. Jenna was always the sweetest when we started working with her. When I was in a buying position, the portfolio was fantastic. You're awesome, dude. I remember always working with you, and I just always need to. I need to commend people on that, because I really appreciate the good people in this world, and especially the good people in our industry, dude. It means a lot to me, and you guys were always super cool. And thoughtful about the things that you did. So just thank you for that, man. I think we need more people like that in the industry. So we'll wrap with that, dude. We'll do part 2 soon.
Automatic. Appreciate you.
Thank you for your time, brother. I appreciate you.